Is it okay for a man over 50 like me to still want these things? Her voice asking me to try just one more time shook my self-control. My name is Daniel. As a single father, I raised my son, who is now 25. Before I knew it, I turned 55. It's been 10 years since my wife, Michelle, passed away. The memories of those days are still vivid in my mind. Michelle complained of feeling bloated, and although I thought it was nothing serious, I encouraged her to visit the hospital. However, the diagnosis was pancreatic cancer with only 1 month to live. I couldn't believe it. After all, my wife looked healthy right before me. Michelle and our son, Andrew, panicked about the sudden news. That's when I decided to take some time off from work. I'm a carpenter. I plunged into this world right after graduating from high school. At the time, I was working on building a new house commissioned by an architect I was close with. When I explained the situation, both the architect and the client readily agreed to delay the construction period for the month. Until Michelle passed away, I devoted myself to caring for her at home, fully supporting Andrew as well. I made sure to live those days without any regrets. It was the most intense month of my life. After she passed away and I was organizing her belongings, I found a drawer filled with numerous letters. There were letters prepared for Andrew to receive each year until he turned 20, titled, Dear Andrew, Dear 16-year-old Andrew, Dear 17-year-old Andrew, and even one for when he gets married, titled, Dear Andrew on his wedding day. I found a letter addressed to me as well. I carefully opened the envelope and read it. The list included age-specific gifts she wanted to give Andrew for his birthdays, his favorite recipes, and mine. It even detailed instructions on how to perform various household tasks. How has she written so much without me noticing? After receiving her terminal diagnosis, she was energetic for about a week, but then quickly deteriorated. Perhaps the weak pen pressure in some places was from when she wasn't feeling well. Imagining Michelle writing these letters in pain brought tears to my eyes. On the last page, it was written, Dear Daniel, after I settle in heaven, fall in love again. Nurture love with someone else. I look forward to discussing your wonderful qualities with that person in heaven. I cried. It had been a while since the funeral, but I had never cried until then. I felt it was unmanly, and somehow, tears just wouldn't come. But upon reading this letter, I cried. It was probably the most I had ever cried in my life. I couldn't imagine feeling up for romance at all. That letter felt like a final farewell, and I kept it hidden deep in the drawer. Even when I opened the drawer to check what to give Andrew for his birthday, I made sure not to look at that last letter. It's been 10 years since then. Even now, at 55, I don't feel like getting into a relationship. Andrew, now 25, still lives at home. I've suggested countless times that he should consider living on his own. But Dad, I'm getting married, he suddenly announced one day. Despite all my urging for him to move out, the thought of him actually leaving felt lonely. Whether he knew how melancholic I felt or not, he cheerfully shared his news. She's a bit older than me, but she's beautiful. It was love at first sight at a mixer, and I really pursued her. When can I bring her over? He seemed a bit shy, yet visibly happy. I could tell he'd had found a good partner as the corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. My work schedule is flexible, so I can make time whenever needed. When I told him to let me know of a convenient day, he quickly left. He mentioned he was going on a date. Is today okay? He asked, but I advised against it since neither I nor his partner were probably ready and sent him off on his date. Really, he has grown into a man who lacks consideration, but I raised him, so maybe it can't be helped. Speaking of which, I remembered there was a gift Michelle wanted to give him for his wedding. For the first time in a long while, I rummaged through the drawer. I hadn't opened the drawer for 5 years since the letters were meant to be given to him only until he turned 20. As I was searching through the drawer, a piece of paper fluttered down. A glimpse of Dear Daniel caught my eye. It was the last page of that letter. The letter that was supposed to be at the bottom of the drawer had fallen out. It was as if it was insisting on something. What could it be? Laughing off the sudden feeling, I put the letter back deep in the drawer. 1 week after Andrew announced his engagement, he brought his fiancée to meet me. "I am Jessica. Nice to meet you." The woman who looked me straight in the eye was 28, 3 years older than Andrew. "It seems you were nervous too, Daniel." Taken aback by her comment, I was momentarily confused. Turning to Andrew, I noticed he was frowning. "Dad, your shirt is inside out." "Ah, shoot." As I scrambled, Jessica burst out laughing. "That's it. I can't handle it. I love how funny you are, Daniel." Her saying, "I love you," caught me off guard. This girl, she reminds me of someone. Especially her smiling face that looked like someone, but who was it? Lately, these things don't come to mind easily. I don't know much about recent pop stars or actresses, but she must look like some celebrity. Deciding to blame it on my age, I stopped trying to figure out who Jessica resembled. "She seems like a fine young lady," I thought as I watched Jessica and Andrew leave through the front door. I spoke to Michelle's photo. "Michelle, don't you think Andrew has caught a fine woman?" She was very classy. "We're going to meet her parents soon. I'll make sure not to wear my shirt inside out then. They say we're going to eat French food. Remember we went just once? The napkins and all those knives were quite a hassle. Her mother is a single mom too. It's good. It would have been hard to face both of them alone." I talked aimlessly and then stood up. It felt like Michelle was smiling a little. On the day of the meal, I checked my shirt carefully and headed to the restaurant in my suit. Andrew was also in a suit, and Jessica wore a beautiful dress. Jessica, who had been checking her mobile phone, turned to me with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, my mother will be a little late due to work. She wants us to go in first," she said, so we decided to enter the restaurant. The table was set beautifully, with a cream-colored tablecloth, dishes, cutlery, and napkins all neatly arranged. Just seeing this made me a bit nervous. Uncharacteristically, I had studied up on the internet. The napkin, I remembered, goes like this on my lap. As I was about to pick up the napkin, a small shriek from Jessica made me jump. "Hey, what are you doing?" Looking up, I saw Andrew picking up the finger bowl, about to drink the water. But he didn't even understand what he was being scolded for. It seems I should have made Andrew brush up on his manners. "That's not drinking water. Look, this is how you wash your fingers," she instructed briskly. I was suddenly reminded of my high school days. I was often scolded like that too, by a girl who was the class rep and my first girlfriend. Back then, I was planning to go straight into carpentry instead of pursuing further education, so I was quite the troublemaker. I fell for a girl who wasn't afraid to scold me whenever I acted up. Initially, she was my nemesis, but somehow we ended up dating. "All right," she confessed to me. She said she couldn't just leave me be. I never expected a class rep to fall for me, so it was quite a surprise and a delight. Come to think of it, Jessica's way of scolding is a bit like how she used to scold. Now that I think about it, even her face. Wait, what was her name? As I pondered this, a woman appeared, saying, "Sorry I'm late." The face I had just been remembering, now slightly marked by wrinkles, seemed like a doppelganger of the woman in my mind, and I couldn't help but exclaim, could it be? Then I recalled the class rep's name and said it out loud, Nicole. The woman widened her eyes and looked at me intently. Apparently, she didn't remember right away. "It's me, Daniel. Remember from high school." As I began to explain, realization dawned on her face. "What, Daniel? No way." She seemed hesitant to continue, so I took over. "I've grown a bit, haven't I?" I laughed heartily. Nicole blushed. "Sorry, you've, well, not so much getting fat as becoming more robust." She didn't forget to put a positive spin on it. That's right. She was always like that. You two know each other. We had left the main subjects of the meeting, our children, behind. As I pondered how to explain, Nicole boldly declared, "We were classmates in high school. Actually, we dated back then." The children were visibly shocked by her revelation. I hadn't expected her to disclose that we dated, and it flustered me a bit. As if anticipating my disarray, Nicole blurted out, "There's no point hiding it. Isn't it a miracle? Our children, who we dated in high school, are getting married to each other." She seemed a bit excited. Understandably so, I was excited too. Actually, I was still feeling quite surreal. What are the odds? The conversation flowed freely from then on, and time flew by quickly. Before we knew it, we had finished dessert. Initially, the focus was on the children. I described Andrew as a bit of a show-off, a troublemaker like me, and so carefree that he wouldn't even bother to prepare for occasions like this. Nicole, while being glared at by Jessica, happily talked about how Jessica was so serious and responsible that she never thought she would get married, but was delighted that she could marry such a wonderful person. Then the conversation turned to us. Nicole knew my wife had passed away, as she had heard it from Jessica. She consoled me, acknowledging how difficult it must have been to lose my wife during Andrew's sensitive teenage years and how hard it surely was. Nicole mentioned that she had divorced her husband due to personality differences when Jessica was in elementary school. Her ex-husband quickly remarried, but she had been too busy raising Jessica alone to think about her own relationships, remaining single since then. As we were deep in conversation, I noticed the kids watching us. They seemed to be smirking a bit. "They look good together, don't they?" Andrew commented, looking at Jessica. To which Jessica jokingly replied, "Why don't they just date then? Don't tease us." I glared at them, but Nicole just looked relaxed. "Oh, come on, it's fine. You've become so rigid," she teased. It felt like the roles of the class rep and the mischievous boy had reversed. Despite being a single mother, Nicole had aged gracefully. After chatting for a while longer, we parted ways. I had put on weight, but she hadn't changed much. She usually wears suits for work, and they really look sharp on her. While thinking about this, Andrew and I were walking home. He teased again, "Didn't it seem like there was a good vibe?" At my age, what good vibe could there possibly be? I retorted sharply, but he continued teasing. Hey, could something happen between you two? Furthermore, he added, "Why did you guys break up? It seemed fine." Oh, if you had stayed together, would I not have been born? I decided to ignore that comment. Why did we break up? Ah, that's right. Nicole went to college, and I pursued carpentry. We ended up in a long-distance relationship, and our lifestyles were so different that we mutually agreed to part ways. We had been together for just over a year, starting when we were seniors in high school. As I pondered this, he cheerfully mentioned, "We'll be seeing each other a lot during the wedding preparations, so good luck." Should parents even be this involved in wedding planning? In my time, it was mostly just the couple doing the preparations, but times might have changed. I didn't mind meeting her, though. Indeed, we ended up seeing each other frequently at the planning meetings. Whether or not dresses and tuxedos suited them was one thing, but choosing the color and type of paper for the invitation seemed trivial to me. However, Nicole, holding an invitation envelope, excitedly remarked, "Oh, this green is lovely. This one's cute too, but pink might be too much for Andrew, don't you think? What do you think, Daniel?" Caught in the spotlight, I pointed to the pink envelopes she favored. "Wow, Dad, that's your taste," he exclaimed. Such matters should be left to the preferences of women. I'd have to give him a proper talk about that later. "You probably reacted the same way when you were young, didn't you, Daniel?" she said playfully, giving me an upward glance. "I wonder if it's a testament to your wife's education," thoughtfully, Nicole said. It seems Nicole had easily figured out that I was accommodating her preferences. Being so involved in the wedding venue felt somewhat uncomfortable, though. Andrew insisted, and I reluctantly accompanied him. These minor exchanges were somewhat enjoyable. Once we get married, should all four of us live together? It sounds like it could be fun. After the color of the invitations was decided and the planner left, leaving just the four of us, Jessica dropped this bombshell. I blushed deeply and denied it outright. Nicole was laughing. Could it be that she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea? If we could laugh together like this, maybe remarriage wasn't such a bad idea. But surely, it was unthinkable for the parents of the children getting married to each other to also marry. Nicole may have aged beautifully, but I had become more robust due to my job, complete with a beer belly. I found myself daydreaming about a life with Nicole, only to dismiss the thought almost immediately. Though it was a bit exhausting, the thrill of our enjoyable conversation lingered as Andrew and I returned home. The house felt unusually cold and bleak. Perhaps it was a backlash from the happy feelings I had just experienced. One photo frame in the living room caught my eye. I realized I hadn't spoken to Michelle in a while. I stared blankly at her photo. The dust-covered frame felt like a blow to my head, proof of my recent neglect. I picked up her photo and wiped off the dust. "Sorry about this, letting so much dust gather," I said softly. Of course, there was no reply from her. What was I getting so carried away about, thinking about romance at this point? "I'd be doing you wrong, wouldn't I?" I muttered again. There was a noise from behind. I wondered if Andrew had overheard my disheartened voice. After that, I started making excuses to avoid going to the planning meetings I was invited to. Although work was a bit busier, I simply didn't feel like attending. Nicole, with whom I had exchanged contact details, occasionally sent me messages to check in with the results of the planning meetings. However, I ignored those messages too. A grown man indulging in romance seemed undignified. Yes, I feared that if I kept meeting Nicole, I wouldn't be able to stop my feelings. I didn't deserve to face Michelle. To dispel my feelings for Nicole, I polished the photo frame until it sparkled. Then, a few months later, the day of Andrew and Jessica's wedding arrived. Since I hadn't replied to Nicole's messages, it felt awkward to face her, so I just exchanged brief greetings and then paced restlessly in the lobby, striking up idle conversations with relatives on the groom's side. As the reception began, things got busy. I toasted with guests and made small talk. Nicole was doing the same. Somehow, I felt relieved that there was some distance between us, because Nicole looked breathtakingly beautiful in her finery. Standing next to her, it felt like my heart might just jump out. The reception proceeded smoothly, and as the atmosphere settled, a spotlight suddenly shone on me. Andrew and Jessica, the bride and groom, looked at me with surprised expressions. I had arranged a surprise with the planner. "Thank you all for being here today. Now, I would like to read a letter from my wife in heaven, addressed to Andrew and Jessica." As I spoke into the microphone, he stared at me wide-eyed. "Dear Andrew, congratulations on your wedding. Dear the bride Jessica, thank you for marrying Andrew." I filled in the blank where it was written to the bride and read it aloud. This was the last letter Michelle had written before she passed away. "Have you learned to eat eggplants? You used to hate." I read, and laughter spilled from Andrew's friends. He still hates eggplants. I continued reading the letter impassively to avoid getting choked up with tears. Soft sobbing could be heard around the venue. This reception I am watching from the sky. I am so happy to see you looking incredibly joyful. May you both be happy forever. Take good care of Jessica. With that, I folded the letter, concluding the emotional moment. I was fidgety, partly because of this, until I finished reading Michelle's letter. I felt barely alive after completing this important task. I let out a huge sigh of relief. Andrew was teary-eyed, but looked at me and grinned mischievously. What was that SCE smile about? As I started to feel less dense and more aware of my surroundings, I noticed that the spotlight had shifted to Andrew. He then took the microphone in his hand. What was he planning to do with a microphone? As I wondered, he also took a letter, familiar pink stationery. It was the same kind of paper I was holding in my hand. Could it be from mother to father? I have a letter to read on her behalf, he announced, sending a shock through me as I stood there dazed. His lips curled into a mischievous grin. Actually, there are 2 letters. One for if the father had remarried, and one for if he hadn't. Since he hasn't remarried, I'll read this one, he said, and the room erupted in laughter. My brain was still trying to catch up. Dear Daniel, so you still haven't remarried? His dramatic shout prompted more laughter from the crowd. You were told to fall in love, but you're still the serious Daniel, aren't you? But see, Andrew is getting married and looks happy, right? I want you to find happiness too. Since Andrew is starting his own family, you should too, Daniel. And there was a pause before the next words. I look forward to the day in heaven when I can talk about your wonderful qualities with your new partner. Indeed, those were the last words I had tucked away way deep in a drawer. I bawled my eyes out, unbecoming of my age, in front of many eyes. I couldn't stop sobbing while the MC cleverly filled up the gap with an ad-lib. I managed to compose myself, holding a handkerchief in one hand, influenced by my sobs. Andrew and Jessica, tears in their eyes, took the microphone and both began speaking simultaneously. Mom, Dad, Nicole, and I exchanged surprised glances. We've decided to read a letter from both of us to both our parents. Andrew and Jessica began speaking in turns. I was quite the troublemaker, he confessed. His words sent a wave of laughter through the crowd. And I was the typical class rep, she added. This time laughter enveloped the bride's side of the room. Dad was a troublemaker too. The spotlight turned to me. I had a bad feeling where this was heading. Mom was also a class rep. Nicole's eyes widened in surprise. I am forever grateful to my dad, who raised me alone. I am forever grateful to my mom, who raised me alone. Their words synchronized perfectly. And now I will be happy with Jessica, he added. I too will be happy with Andrew, she said. And so the two said together, please make sure Dad and Mom are also happy. I could tell that Nicole was shivering next to me. When I try to look at Nicole, Andrew suddenly shouts, Dad. Startled, I look straight at Andrew again. Talking with Mom in heaven, that must be Nicole's job. Hearing him shout that, I panic. Don't say such reckless things. You're making Nicole uncomfortable. As I say that, Jessica grabs the microphone. Mom, it's not so bad, right? Hearing her words, I finally look at Nicole, who has her face covered with her hands, blushing to her ears. Then Nicole's lips move. It's not something I should say in front of everyone. Nicole whispers to me in a voice so low that only I can hear. I know you care deeply for Michelle. Those words stir my heart, and they make me hopeful. Should I, a man over 50, still hope for such things? But shall we try it just one more time? Her whispered continuation shakes my self-control. Andrew and Jessica seem to hear it as they are both smiling broadly, trying not to look at their faces. I speak to Nicole. But it's not fair to Michelle or you. Barely squeezing out the words, Nicole, Chickles, silly, I'll probably get along famously with Michelle in heaven. After all, we have the same taste in men. Knocked out by her words, thinking about our children marrying and us marrying too, it's bizarre. Concerned about looking foolish in front of relatives, friends of our children, I let go of all such worries and embraced Nicole. I remember the first time I held her during high school. It was after she confessed her feelings to me. Just like that time, I made the same promise as I did in high school, to cherish her delicate and slender form. I will always be there for you, this time for sure. I added those words to my old vow. Years later, I'm pacing between the living room and the front door. Seeing me, Nicole sighs at Michelle's picture, exasperated. Can you see him? He can't settle down, she speaks to Michelle. You've met Annie at the hospital, right? What's got you so fidgety? A challenge, I retort. It's her first time coming to this house. Annie is our granddaughter. Nickel dismisses my argument with an okay, okay, and sits down by the window. She gestures for me to come over. I obediently follow. Sitting and looking out at the garden, I see a small tree reaching up to the sky. Nickel and I planted it when we were married. Given our age, we don't have much time left. Feeling faint-hearted, I mentioned this to Nickel, who bought a sapling. Let's live long enough to see this tree grow taller than the house and then have a nice chat with Michelle. Her smile as she said this is dazzling, and I'm reminded of it every time I see this tree. It seems like it will take a while for that tree to reach the roof. Hearing that, Nickel says, "Let's make lots of memories in that time." Nickel rests her small head on my shoulder. I wrap my arm around her shoulders. I love this peaceful moment by the window. It feels like Michelle is laughing behind us. Just then, I hear the sound of a car engine. Oh, looks like they're here. It's probably Andrew and Jessica's car. They've come to visit, bringing our first grandchild. We need to greet them. Nickel and I exchange glances, stand up, and walk towards the entrance.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, "I'm moving to the sales department soon." If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. "Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.